My neighbor keyed my car, stole my packages, and dumped trash on my lawn for months. I tried to handle it quietly, but he kept denying. So we reviewed my front yard camera footage with the police. I closed on my first house in late August. Nothing crazy, just a 3-bedroom ranch on a cul-de-sac in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. The kind of neighborhood where people wave at you when they're getting their mail, and everyone's got one of those little garden flags by the front door. I'd been renting apartments since college, 6 years, in a 2-bedroom with a window AC unit that sounded like a helicopter taking off every time it kicked on. And honestly, the whole homeowner thing felt surreal for the first few weeks. I remember standing in my empty living room eating cold pizza off a paper plate thinking, this is actually mine. Just that. Stood there like an idiot for a solid 10 minutes. The pizza was from that place on High Street, the one with the garlic knots that are weirdly good. Not relevant. I just remember the whole moment really clearly. Anyway, the move went smooth. Movers showed up on a Saturday, got everything inside by mid-afternoon. One of the movers dropped a box labeled Kitchen Fragile down the front steps, and I heard something shatter inside. Turned out to be a set of mugs my mom had given me when I graduated. I was annoyed for about 5 seconds and then figured it was a sign I needed new mugs anyway. I spent that Sunday unpacking the kitchen because I figured that was the room I'd need first. My buddy Cole came over and helped me mount the TV. We ordered way too much Chinese food, like an absurd amount enough for 5 people, and watched college football on the floor because I hadn't set up the couch yet. Good day. The neighborhood seemed great at first. The couple across the street, Don and Liz, came over with a plate of brownies my first week. Homemade, still warm. Don was retired, early 60s, seemed like a genuinely nice guy. Former school principal had this easy way of talking to people where you felt like you'd known him for years even though you just met. Liz told me which days were trash pickup and recycling and gave me the whole rundown on the HOA, which was basically non-existent. They collect $150 a year, and all it really covers is the little sign at the entrance to the neighborhood and the common area landscaping. She also told me about the block party they do every 4th of July and how the guy at the end of the street does a fireworks show in his backyard. That's technically illegal, but nobody cares. They were the kind of neighbors you actually want. My next-door neighbor to the left was a woman named Rita, probably mid-50s, kept to herself, but always had a polite nod when we crossed paths. She had a perfect lawn, and these rose bushes along her front walk that looked like they belonged in a magazine. No complaints there. And then there was the neighbor to my right. This guy, I'll call him what my buddy Cole started calling him later on the night shift. His real name doesn't matter, and honestly, I don't even want to type it. He was maybe late 40s, lived alone, drove a dark blue pickup that was always backed into the driveway like he needed to make a fast getaway at any moment. His yard was fine, not as manicured as Rita's, but he mowed it and kept things in order. House was a similar ranch style to mine, maybe a little older. He had one of those satellite dishes on the roof that nobody uses anymore. When I moved in, he was standing in his driveway just watching. Not casually either, arms crossed, feet planted, head tracking the movers like he was counting inventory. Didn't wave, didn't come over, didn't say a single word. One of the movers actually looked at me and kind of gestured toward him like, "What's that guy's deal?" I waved at him. He turned around and went inside. I didn't think much of it. Honestly, some people are private, and some people are just awkward. Whatever. I figured I'd win him over eventually, or at the very least, we'd have the kind of neighbor relationship where you nod at each other once a month. And that's fine. The first incident happened about 2 weeks after I moved in. September 9th. I know the exact date because I took a photo that morning and it's time-stamped. I walked out to my car on a Monday morning heading to work. I'm an insurance claims adjuster, so I drive to different sites most days inspecting damage on homes, vehicles, commercial properties, that kind of thing. And there was a long, deep scratch running along the entire passenger side of my car from the front fender all the way to the rear bumper, like someone took a key or a nail and just dragged it the full length in one steady motion. My car was a 2021 Civic. Nothing fancy, but I'd kept it in really good shape. Waxed it twice a year. Always parked it away from other cars and parking lots. The scratch was deep enough that you could feel it with your fingernail through the clear coat, through the paint, down to the primer in some spots. I was ticked off, but I honestly assumed it was random. Maybe a kid, maybe someone walking by who had a problem with the world. I parked on the street because my garage was still full of boxes I hadn't unpacked yet. Could have been anyone. I got a quote to fix it. $1,400. I put it off because between the down payment, the closing costs, and the 40 other things a new house needs, I had a million expenses already. 2 weeks later, it happened again. September 23rd, different side this time. 2 parallel scratches on the driver's side. Same depth, Same deliberate straight line pattern. Not random scratching. These were controlled even. And went the full length of the car. Another $800 estimate. The body shop guy looked at both sides and said, "Someone doesn't like you, man." That's when I started to wonder, but I still didn't have a suspect. Then the packages started disappearing. I ordered a new doorbell camera. Ironic, I know. I'll get to that. It was supposed to arrive on a Wednesday. Tracking said delivered. No package on the porch. I ordered a replacement set of drill bits from Amazon the next week. Delivered according to the tracking, gone. A pair of work boots I needed for site visits delivered, gone. I filed reports with the carrier each time, but nothing came of it. Over the next couple months, I lost probably 6 or 7 packages total. The value wasn't huge on most of them, maybe $600 altogether, but it was the principle and the pattern. This wasn't random porch pirating. Someone was specifically watching for my deliveries. Then came the dog waste. I don't own a dog. Never have. But starting in maybe mid-October, I'd wake up and find dog waste on my front lawn. Not like an animal wandered through and did its business. This was placed deliberately right in the middle of the lawn where you couldn't miss it. Sometimes near the walkway where you'd step in it if you weren't paying attention. It happened probably 8 or 9 times over a 6-week period. I started getting paranoid. I'd lie in bed at night and hear a noise outside a car door, a branch, anything, and I'd be at the window in 2 seconds. I never saw anything, though. My front porch light didn't illuminate much past the steps, and I still hadn't gotten around to installing the replacement doorbell camera. The first one got stolen, remember? Which is almost funny in hindsight. I bought a cheap motion-activated floodlight and put it above my garage door. $80. It helped a little, but whoever was doing this seemed to know exactly where the light reached, and they stayed just outside of it. I even started parking my car in different spots on the street, thinking maybe it was a proximity thing. Didn't help. I talked to a couple of my coworkers about it. One of them, a guy named Bryce, who handles auto claims, said I should set up a trail cam like you'd use for deer hunting. I looked into it, but the cheap ones have terrible night vision, and the good ones were like $300 that I didn't want to spend on top of everything else. I mean, I was already hemorrhaging money from the scratches and the stolen packages. By December, I was genuinely stressed. The car had been scratched 4 times total at that point. 2 on the passenger side, 2 on the driver's side. All the same pattern. Long, deliberate, consistent depth. Repair estimates combined were pushing $3,800. I'd had at least 7 packages go missing. And the lawn thing was just gross and weird and felt personal in a way that's hard to describe. I started wondering if I'd somehow offended someone without knowing it. I went over every single interaction I'd had since moving in. I replayed conversations in my head. I couldn't think of a single thing I'd done wrong. I even knocked on the night shift's door one evening to ask if he'd seen anything suspicious in the neighborhood. He opened the door about 6 in, told me he hadn't seen anything, and closed it before I could even finish asking. The whole conversation lasted maybe 4 seconds. I stood on his porch for a moment after the door shut, feeling like an idiot. That was the last time I tried to talk to him. Here's where I need to back up and explain something about how I think. I've been an insurance claims adjuster for 8 years. My entire job is looking at a situation and figuring out what actually happened based on evidence, witness statements, photos, timelines, damage patterns. I do this every single day. And the damage to my car, the consistent depth, the straight lines, the fact that it always happened overnight, that wasn't random vandalism. That was someone who knew exactly where my car was parked and had time to do it carefully. Someone close. Hold on. For those listening, this is me, not the OP. I need to jump in here because this is giving me strong Scooby-Doo energy. You know how the villain is always someone who was standing right there the whole time? Some dude in a rubber mask who could have been caught in episode 1 if anyone had just looked to their left. That's this guy. The night shift is literally standing in his driveway, with his arms crossed, watching Jake move in like a cartoon villain, monologuing in his head. All that was missing was a swivel chair and a white cat. And Jake, bless his heart, went and knocked on the dude's door to ask if he'd seen anything. My brother, you ask the wolf if he'd seen any sheep go missing. I can't. In January, I finally had a real conversation with Dawn from across the street. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was grabbing my mail from my new locking mailbox, by the way, because, yeah, I'd already upgraded that after a piece of mail I was expecting never showed up. Don was doing something in his front garden bed, and he saw me and walked over. We talked for a while. Normal stuff at first, how the winter was going, whether the HOA had responded to some pothole complaint, that kind of thing. Then he asked about the scratches on my car because he'd noticed them from across the street. I hadn't really talked to anyone in the neighborhood about everything that was going on, so it all kind of came out at once. I told him about the car, the packages, the dog stuff, the dead grass, everything. I probably talked for 10 straight minutes. He just listened with his arms folded, nodding. Then he got quiet for a second, looked at my house, looked at the night shift's house, and then said something that changed everything. Jake, I've got a Ring camera on my front door. It's been there for 2 years. It points straight across the street at your house and your neighbor's driveway. I've got months of footage saved to the cloud. I swear my heart skipped. I asked if he'd be willing to let me look through it. He said absolutely. Said he and Liz had actually talked about the scratches on my car a few weeks ago and were wondering what was going on. Liz had apparently said she wanted to bring it up, but didn't want to be nosy. Dawn told me to come over after dinner that evening and we'd go through it together. That night, I walked across the street at about 7:30. Liz let me in and Dawn already had his laptop set up at the kitchen table with 2 chairs pulled up. Liz made coffee. The 3 of us sat down and Dawn pulled up the Ring app. His camera had a clear, wide-angle view of my front yard, my driveway, the strip of street where I parked my car. And this is the important part, it also caught about half of the night shift's driveway and his side yard. Dawn's Ring was set to record on motion detection with a pretty wide sensitivity range. So we had a ton of clips. Most of them were cars driving by, deer wandering through at night, Dawn's cat setting off the sensor, but we started filtering for clips between midnight and 5 a.m., specifically ones where there was motion near my property. The first clip we found was from September 14th at 2:47 a.m., and I will never forget watching it for the first time. The night shift walked out of his side door, the one that faces my house, wearing what looked like sweatpants and a dark shirt. He crossed the strip of grass between our properties, maybe 15 feet, and approached my car on the passenger side. He was carrying something in his right hand. It was hard to tell exactly what from the camera angle, but it was small, thin, and pointed. He put his arm out and walked the full length of my car, slowly deliberate. Then he turned around, walked back across the grass, went inside and shut the door. The whole thing took about 90 seconds. 90 seconds to do $1,400 in damage. I just sat there staring at the screen. My hands were shaking a little, not from anger. Well, partly anger, but mostly from the realization that I'd been right. Someone was targeting me, and it was the guy 10 feet from my bedroom window. Dawn looked at me and said, "Keep going. There's more." The next clip was from September 28th. Same exact pattern. Side door. 3:12 a.m. Crossed to my car, walked the length of it with his arm extended against the driver's side this time. Went back inside like clockwork. Like this was just part of his routine. Wake up, set an alarm or whatever. Walk outside in the dark, scratch the neighbor's car, go back to sleep. We found 11 clips total spanning from September through the end of December. 4 of them showed him scratching my car on different dates, all between 2 and 4 a.m. Each time the same methodical walk alongside the vehicle with his arm extended. 3 clips showed him walking up to my front porch, picking up a package and carrying it back to his house. On one of these, he actually paused under the street light long enough that you could see the Amazon logo on the box he was holding. And 4 clips. This is the part that still gets me, showed him walking onto my lawn with a plastic bag, crouching down, placing something on the grass and walking back. He was depositing the dog waste by hand from a plastic bag, which means he was collecting it from somewhere, storing it, and then placing it on my property at 3 a.m., like some kind of deranged lawn gnome. Dawn and I sat there for probably 2 hours going through everything. His wife Liz came in at one point and just stood behind us shaking her head. She said she'd always thought something was off about that guy, but figured he was just antisocial. I asked Don if he'd let me compile the footage. He said, "Go for it." Okay, stop. Let me break down what's actually going on in this man's brain, because it's genuinely fascinating in a nature documentary about the world's dumbest predator kind of way. The night shift doesn't have a reason to hate Jake. Jake moved in, waved at the guy, minded his own business. But the night shift decided he was going to launch a one-man covert ops campaign against this random dude's property at 3 a.m., using a bag of dog poop as one of his primary weapons. This isn't a grudge, this is a full-time hobby. He set alarms for this, he prepped materials, he had a routine, and the whole time he thought he was invisible because nobody had a camera pointed his direction, except somebody did, and it recorded everything in HD. Over the next week, I did what I do best. I built a case. I went through every clip Dawn gave me access to. I screenshot the clearest frames from each incident. I put together a timeline, date-time type of incident clip reference number. I cross-referenced the footage dates with my own records. The dates of the car scratches matched up exactly with the clips showing him approaching the vehicle. The dates of missing packages lined up with clips of him taking boxes off my porch. Everything matched. I also started documenting the cumulative damage. 4 sets of car scratches, repair estimates totaling $3,800. 7 confirmed stolen packages. Replacement value around $600. The motion-activated floodlight I bought because of him. $120. The doorbell camera he stole that was one of the packages, $180. Cost to have my lawn treated after repeated contamination, $200. Time and stress and lost sleep, honestly priceless. But I didn't include that. Total documented damage, $6,900. But I wasn't done. I wanted to know if there was anything else. I asked Don if I could go through the footage more carefully on my own. He gave me his Ring login so I could access the cloud storage directly. Over the next few days, I went through every single motion-triggered clip from August through January. Everyone. And I found more. There were clips of the night shift standing at the edge of his property line at odd hours, just staring at my house, not doing anything specific, just standing there. There were 2 clips where he appeared to tamper with my mailbox, opening it, looking inside, closing it. I couldn't prove he took mail, but the fact that he was accessing my mailbox at 2:30 a.m. is a federal offense on its own. I also found 3 clips of him doing something to my garden hose, which explained why it had a leak I couldn't figure out. And one clip, this one made me furious, showed him pouring something along the edge of my lawn near the property line. I'd noticed that strip of grass had turned brown and died, and I couldn't figure out why. He was killing my grass on purpose. Revised damage total with the additional incidents, $11,400. That included the lawn damage, mailbox tampering. I had to get a locking mailbox, $80. The garden hose replacement and additional property damage I could now attribute to him based on the footage and timeline. I made a highlight reel. No joke. I compiled the clearest, most damning clips into one video organized chronologically with dates and timestamps visible. I also created a written incident log that looked exactly like the kind of documentation I put together for insurance claims at work. Because that's literally what this was, a claim, just not one I'd ever processed through my office. Wait, hold the phone. Jake said he made a highlight reel. A highlight reel. This man put together a greatest hits compilation of his neighbor's 3 a.m. crime spree like he was editing a montage for the NFL draft. I'm picturing dramatic music, slow motion replays, maybe a freeze frame with a red circle around the Amazon box, and the incident log formatted like an actual insurance claim. What's next? The night shift getting a claims denial letter in his mailbox. Dear sir, upon review, your nightly vandalism has been denied coverage due to you being a complete psychopath. Please reference claim number OGAWAY. This is the most insurance adjuster revenge I've ever heard of, and I am absolutely here for it. I took everything to the police. I walked into the station on a Tuesday morning with a USB drive containing the compiled footage, a printed copy of my incident log, printed screenshots of the clearest frames, and the damage estimates from the body shop. The officer at the front desk looked at the stack of papers I put down and said, "This is thorough." Yeah, I hear that a lot at work. They assigned a detective to the case, a woman named Detective Hale, who looked like she'd seen everything twice. I sat with her for about an hour and a half going through the footage clip by clip and walking through my timeline. She took notes on a legal pad. She was shaking her head by the 3rd clip. By the time we got to the dog waste placement clip, specifically, the one where you can see him crouching on my lawn at 3:15 a.m. with a plastic bag, she actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how genuinely bizarre it was. She said she'd been doing this job for 15 years, had dealt with neighbor disputes of every kind imaginable, and had never once seen someone go to this much effort to be this petty over this long of a period. She asked if I had any idea why he was targeting me. I told her I'd never had a single real conversation with the man. I'd waved at him on moving day. I'd knocked on his door once to ask about suspicious activity in the neighborhood. That was literally it. The full extent of our relationship was 1 wave and 4 seconds of him telling me he hadn't seen anything through a 6-inch crack in his door. She said, sometimes neighbors develop fixations on new residents for no rational reason. Sometimes it's a territorial thing. Sometimes it's something going on in their own life that they take out on the nearest target. Sometimes they're just miserable people who want everyone around them to be miserable too. She said the methodical nature of it, the timing, the consistency, the fact that he did it over months without escalating to anything violent, was actually pretty textbook for a certain type of personality. The detective told me that based on the footage, they had enough to move forward with criminal charges. The car scratching alone was criminal mischief. The package theft was straight-up larceny. The mailbox tampering was potentially a federal offense. And the pattern of behavior over months showed it wasn't a one-time thing. It was sustained targeted harassment. I also filed a separate report for the mail tampering and forwarded the footage to the Postal Inspector's office. If you didn't know, messing with someone's mail is a federal crime under Title 18 of the U.S. Code. The postal inspectors do not play around. About a week and a half later, the detective called me at work. I was in the middle of inspecting water damage at a commercial property, and I almost didn't answer because I didn't recognize the number. Glad I did. She said they had reviewed everything. The DA had signed off and they were ready to make an arrest. She asked if there was anything else I wanted to add to the file before they moved. I told her no. I'd given her everything. The file was complete. She asked if I wanted to be notified before the arrest happened. I said I'd prefer not to be home when it went down. Didn't want to be standing in my yard watching it happen. Felt like that would make things worse somehow, she understood. They picked him up on a Thursday afternoon around 3 p.m. I was at a site visit about 40 minutes away, but Don was home. Don's always home. Bless that man. And he texted me a play-by-play in real time. 2 officers just pulled up, then a minute later they're at his door, then he's coming out. He looks confused, then they just put him in the back of the car. He didn't look your way once. He's just staring straight ahead. I sat in my car in a parking lot reading those texts, and I honestly didn't feel triumphant or victorious or whatever word you'd expect. I just felt tired and relieved. Mostly relieved. Good. He was charged with criminal mischief, petty larceny, multiple counts, criminal trespass, and harassment. The mailbox situation was referred to the federal postal inspector separately, and as of my last check, that investigation is still pending. The detective told me the DA's office was considering additional charges based on the sustained pattern, but I don't have details on that yet. What I do know is that he was released on bond with conditions that include no contact with me and he can't be on my property, which is funny because I'd never invited him onto my property in the first place. Yo, time out. Can we take a moment to appreciate how Jake handled this from start to finish? Because most people in this situation would have lost it. They would have confronted the guy, gotten in a shouting match, maybe done something stupid that gets them in trouble. Jake didn't do any of that. He did exactly what he does Monday through Friday. He collected evidence, built a file, organized it like a professional, and handed it to the people whose job it is to act on it. The detective called his paperwork thorough. That's the equivalent of a chef complimenting your cooking. The night shift brought a plastic bag of dog poop to a fight with an insurance claims adjuster. Read that sentence again. Final update. It's been a couple weeks since the arrest and things have been quiet, obviously. The night shift is still living next door as far as I know, but I haven't seen him once. His truck is in the driveway most days, but he doesn't come outside when I'm around. The blinds on the side of his house that faces mine are always closed now. It's like living next to a ghost, which honestly is a massive upgrade from living next to a 3 a.m. lawn vandalizing package, stealing car, scratching psycho. My car is getting repaired finally. I'm using the documentation I built to file a civil claim for the damages. And my attorney, a guy I know from processing claims. We've worked opposite sides of a few cases, says the criminal charges make the civil case pretty straightforward. Between the footage, the police report, and the charge sheet, there's not a ton of wiggle room for the night shift to argue he didn't do it. Don and Liz have become actual friends. I go over there for dinner sometimes. Don grills on his back patio, and we sit out there and talk about whatever. He told me that the night shift had actually done some weird stuff before I moved in too. Nothing as bad as what he did to me, but Don had caught him on camera looking into other neighbors' cars and walking through people's yards at night. He just never connected it to anything criminal until my situation made it obvious. Rita, my neighbor on the other side, came over after the arrest and told me she was glad someone finally did something. Apparently, she'd found her flower pots moved around a few times and once found one of her garden tools in a different spot than she left it. She chalked it up to her own memory, but now she's not so sure. I did finally install that doorbell camera and a full 4-camera security system around the house. 2 in front, 2 in back motion, activated night vision cloud storage. I also got the locking mailbox installed and added a smart lock to my front door. Total cost for the security upgrades was about $1,200, but honestly, it's the best money I've ever spent. Not because I think he'll try something again. The no contact order handles that. But because I should have had this stuff from day one. Lesson learned. The one thing I keep thinking about is why. I never did anything to this man. I moved in. I waved. I went about my life. and he decided to make me his target. The detective said it might have been something as simple as him not wanting a new neighbor. The previous owner was an elderly woman who lived alone and kept to herself. Maybe he liked having that quiet buffer and my presence disrupted it. Maybe it's something else entirely. I'll probably never know. My buddy Cole saw the highlight reel and said it should be on Netflix. I told him it's a 20-minute video of a middle-aged man in pajamas sneaking across a lawn with a bag of dog waste. He said that's exactly why it should be on Netflix. There's a part of me that wonders what the other neighbors on the street think now. I've gotten a few waves and head nods since the arrest, but nobody's brought it up directly. Small town. Well, suburban politeness, I guess. Everyone knows, but nobody says it. As for what's next, I'm waiting on the civil case to move forward and keeping an eye on the federal mail investigation. My attorney says the civil suit should be pretty clean given the evidence. I'm asking for the full $11,400 in documented damages plus legal fees. Whether I'll get all of it, who knows? But the documentation is airtight, and I've got the footage to back every dollar. I guess the moral of the story, if there is one, is that some problems solve themselves if you're patient enough to let the evidence pile up. I could have confronted him at any point. I could have gotten angry, made a scene, escalated it, but I didn't. I let the cameras do the talking and the paperwork do the fighting. And honestly, the highlight reel is pretty solid. Quick update for anyone still following along. The DA's office added an additional charge of criminal damage to property based on the grass-killing footage. My attorney also sent a formal demand letter to the night shift's legal representation for the full $11,400. We're waiting on a response. Don told me the guy's brother came by last weekend to mow the lawn and take out the trash, so I think the night shift is laying very low right now. Can't say I blame him, though. I also can't say I feel bad about it. One thing I didn't mention before, I still have no idea where he was getting the dog waste. He doesn't have a dog. None of the immediate neighbors have dogs. That remains the one unsolved mystery of this whole thing. And honestly, I'm not sure I want the answer. Anyway, if you're in a situation like mine, document everything. Get cameras. Get your neighbors involved. And if your job happens to involve building evidence files for a living, well, sometimes the universe just hands you the right tools for the job.